to show on the screen. Okay. Councillor Sandra MacDonald.
Present.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
I'm here.
Councillor, sorry, I said that last time. Dr. Maggie Bochel.
Here.
Councillor David Aitchison.
Present.
Councillor Philip Bell. No Councillor Bell today. Councillor George Carr.
Good afternoon.
Councillor John Cox.
Present.
Councillor Michael Hutchison.
Present.
Councillor Avril Mackenzie.
Present.
Colin Allenach.
Here.
Jerry Donald.
Present.
And Ian Ross.
I spoke to Ian Ross earlier, and he may join us for part of the meeting, but oh, there he is now. Excellent. He's just
Okay. Ian is with us. I'll just hand you back to the chairperson to start the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mark. First of all, any declarations of interest from members this afternoon? I'm not seeing any hands, so can we move on to welcome Alex Hines from Scotland's Railways, along with Ewan Tate. It's I was thinking probably coming up for a couple of years since we last heard from Alex, and quite a lot of things have happened in the course of that time, as we're all aware. So very much welcome. An introduction from piece from yourself, Alex, and then we can maybe come on to questions later on. Would be great. So over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you to the Nestrans Board for inviting me here today. I'm delighted to give you a little update as to what we've been up to recently and take your questions. And your feedback always helps us improve the service we provide to customers and to the general public in the Northeast, and that's we're committed to listening to your questions, comments and feedback. So obviously we've had the small matter of the pandemic to manage, and I pay tribute to our frontline workforce in both ScotRail and Network Rail Scotland for keeping the railway operating reliably for those people who absolutely needed it, and of course for freight as well, to keep the lights on and shelves stacked. We've made it look relatively easy, but it wasn't, I can assure you. And we're enormously grateful to Scottish Government for stepping in and securing services and jobs and terms and conditions throughout the pandemic through additional subsidy to offset the loss of revenue. We've been building back our service. We're now operating about 83% of our pre-pandemic timetable, and we're carefully managing supply and demand so that we carry those people who want to travel, but also don't waste the taxpayers too much money. Actually, in the Northeast, it's a more positive story. We're operating 86% of our pre-pandemic timetable already, and on places like Aberdeen to Inverness, we are operating the full timetable as before. The key thing which is hampering our operation right now is physical distancing. The railways in Scotland are on a 1 metre plus basis for physical distancing. That's 1 metre plus a face covering, and clearly that destroys our capacity because we might be able to get one customer around a bay of 4 rather than 4. And we very much look forward to hearing from the public health authorities when they intend to drop physical distancing, because that will really transform our capacity. It's not possible to train a driver and physically distance, because you can't physically distance in the cab of a train. So since the start of the pandemic, the driver training programme has been severely compromised across Great Britain. We've done that to keep our people safe. and we're starting to reinstate driver training now, and that means we can't get back to pre-pandemic levels of service, even if we wanted to, because of this training backlog which the pandemic has created. But we're carefully navigating that, and if you're aware of circumstances where the current service provision is not sufficient, please let us know, because we follow up each and every one of those circumstances. Of course, a bit of good news in all this gloom was we did open Kintore Station in the middle of a pandemic, which is a bit of a weird one, and I hope you feel as proud as I do that we provided this fantastic station 19 minutes into the centre of Aberdeen compared to an hour on the bus. And not only that, it's the largest electric vehicle charging point in the whole of the northeast of Scotland. Clearly, one of the reasons why we'll remember last year were the terrible, terrible events of the 12th of August, where the accident at Carmont meant that Brett, Donald and Christopher were tragically killed. That wasn't just the worst day of my professional life, it was the worst day of my life. And we are making sure that we take every single step we can to avoid a similar accident happening again. Clearly it's being independently investigated, but we have already changed the way we operate the railway here in Scotland as a result of that. And I think one of the most stark findings of some of the task forces which were commissioned immediately after the accident was that climate change is affecting Scotland more than the other 3 nations of the UK. And that is a challenge of a generation. Climate change is not something happening to somebody else, somewhere else. It's happening now in Scotland, and we have to meet that challenge. Also, the franchise was due to end in March next year, as per the 7 years which was envisaged by the franchise agreement. You'll remember that Scottish Government announced about 18 months ago they weren't going to run the full 10-year franchise. And what happened was COVID essentially killed off franchising in UK rail, and every franchise in the country, including ScotRail, moved on to something called an emergency measures agreement. And essentially what that did was to keep the businesses solvent, to keep services running, to protect jobs. And so the franchise is no longer, the franchise agreement is no longer in existence. And we've got these emergency agreements. So the current one runs to September of this year. We hope to negotiate a further 6 months arrangement from September this year to March next. And then on the 1st of April next year, a new operator takes over the operation of the ScotRail business. That will be a company wholly owned by Scottish Government. The legal name of it will be ScotRail Trains Limited. And whilst from a legislation point of view, that will be described as the operator of last resort, actually, we won't be calling it the operator of last resort, we'll be calling it ScotRail, and we'll continue delivering for customers. We are currently developing our timetable plans for May next year, and we'll be coming out to talk to you about those. And clearly the rail industry in Britain has a massive financial crisis because even now we are 60% down on passenger numbers and revenue compared to last year. That is a hundreds of millions of pounds hole in our budget, and therefore given that all these costs are now being met by the taxpayer, we want to come up with a great timetable, but one which is efficient as well. Pre-pandemic, the load factor of ScotRail was only 50%, which is not necessarily great value for money for the taxpayer. So we'll be consulting with you on our May 22 timetable plans. We continue to invest throughout the pandemic. So we now have our 25 high-speed trains, we're in the process of lengthening those high-speed trains from 4 carriages to 5, and we've continued to invest in stations as well. So some of you may have seen we're now on site with the Aberdeen station redevelopment, and we're really, really excited about that. I read your regional transport strategy last night, and one of the things that really warmed my heart was actually listing the achievements, the rail achievements, which have been achieved by the rail industry working in partnership with bodies such as yourself. I think we've got a proud record of improving rail services in the northeast, but of course there's more to do, isn't there? Do we want to see a bigger and better railway for Scotland? Absolutely. But as you know, with both my hats on, at the end of the day, I am still just a government contractor. And one of the key things we're working on with Transport Scotland and ScotRail and Network Rail is what we're calling the Decarbonisation Action Plan, a commitment by Scottish Government to remove diesel vehicles, diesel trains from the network by 2035, which sounds like a long way away, but in railway terms, it's not. It's only 14 years away. And we're currently working out how we decarbonise the railway, and we are envisaging a huge programme of continuous electrification. There will be investment in battery technology and hydrogen, I am sure, but actually continuous electrification will be the key part of our decarbonisation plans. So lots going on in the northeast. 2 big priorities for me. How do we get the net cost of the railway back to pre-pandemic levels as fast as we can? And how do we deliver net zero for Scotland? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Alex. And it's a long list that we have been in partnership together, and as you say, there have been some real highlights and some real heart-wrenching difficulties and moments that we've all had to deal with over the past 18 months or so since you were last here. Any questions or comments or thoughts from board members? I've got Councillor Peter Argyle first.
Great, thanks very much. And Alex, thanks for that. There's clearly some good things happened. There's some serious challenges. And of course, there was the August the 12th, which is a day none of us, I think, will forget. I wonder if I could just pick up on the last point you raised, the decarbonisation. Removing all diesel trains by 2035, which is what, 14 years, is going to be challenging. Do you want to, could you expand on that a little bit, what your thinking is? Because the infrastructure is going to be a challenge, the trains is going to be a challenge, the training of people is going to be a challenge, etc., etc. Just frankly, thinking about it now, I don't see how you're going to do it.
Well, if I don't do it, they'll find someone who can. That's the first thing. So I'm going to try and do it. So there's a huge amount of teamwork happening between ScotRail, Network Rail and Transport Scotland. That is the first thing to say. Unparalleled levels of collaboration between the infrastructure, the rolling stock teams and our timetable teams to manage this in a joined up, coordinated way. So we need to decarbonise by 2035, but we don't want to do it all in 2034, do we? Because that will be a disaster. So what we need is a rolling programme of decarbonisation. We're already delivering our rolling programme of electrification here in Scotland. We're on site electrifying the East Kilbride and Barrhead lines into Glasgow. And one of the things we're seeking to do is to try and work out exactly how much electrification we need to do each year and then try and smooth that programme, because that will help the supply chain. It will also mean we get better prices, and reducing the unit cost of electrification is a key challenge of ours. The other thing we're going to do is look at, well, we've done it already, is look at our rolling stock and work out when does that rolling stock need replacing. And then when we replace it, we'll replace it with a decarbonised train rather than go out buying new diesel trains, which would be mad. So, for example, the decarbonisation commitment is for 2035, but our high-speed trains, which operate on the 7 cities, will be life expired around 2030. So one of the things we're looking at is, can we electrify to Aberdeen and Inverness by 2030 rather than 2035, and then we can buy a brand new electric train. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. And if we're going to electrify, we don't just want to electrify, we want to create a better railway, a higher capacity railway to drive modal shift and revenue. So in the case of Central Belt to Aberdeen, we're hoping to go into the railway in the sort of middle of this decade to improve journey times and then electrify it. And then, of course, we'll get new rolling stock. So, you know, we'll have a shiny new railway by 2035, which isn't just decarbonised, but is higher speed, higher capacity and modernised. So, you know, we are doing lots of business case work in this area, and we're hoping that by the autumn time, Scottish Government will be able to make some big decisions in this area.
And is there anything we can do you think, to speed up that process? Because I'm very aware, in most of my adult life, we have been talking about the electrification of the East Coast line, and you know, we know where the pinch points are. It's just that you know, for me, it's that political will to commit and do it. And so anything that we can do, you know, to help that process would be very welcome.
Well, I mean, obviously, the climate change crisis perversely has helped the case for this. It's not just about moving people, it's about saving the planet as well. So, you know, there's a greater commitment from government. In July of last year, Transport Scotland published its decarbonisation action plan. That was a post-coronavirus commitment. So despite the pandemic and the financial headaches that will give us, Scottish Government still want to decarbonise by 2035. Fantastic. So I guess you can help by continuing to prod and poke and say, you know, Transport Scotland, ScotRail, Network Rail, how are you getting on with delivering that decarb action plan?
Thanks. I've got Ian Rawson next. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Alex. I'll just pick up on Councillor Argyle's point about the infrastructure rather than what you might call the rolling stock. Obviously, the latter is in your control, but the infrastructure, which I think Councillor Argyle was rightly suggesting, is a massive undertaking in terms of the physical work, all the adjustments that have got to be made to get the electrical supplies in and so on. That does seem like a really long shot in the time period. So I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that as opposed to the trains. And the other thing I'm interested in, which you might follow up on, is that you said climate change effects are worse in Scotland than they are in the other UK nations. Just briefly, what was behind that? Thank you.
Okay, so my role as the MD of the Alliance means I'm the head of ScotRail and the head of Network Rail in Scotland. We would argue that close cooperation between track and train is one reason why our railway is better than the railway south of the border. And it also makes change easier. And actually, Scotland has got a proud record of electrifying its railway. And in 2018, one of the many electrification projects we worked on was the Stirling Dunblane Aller electrification programme, which was delivered on budget early. And this programme of continuous electrification needs to see us delivering that scale of scheme every year for the next 14 years. And I said, we're already on site. And what we're finding is the more we do, the better we get at it. The quicker we can do it, the more cheaply we can do it. we can do it in a less disruptive manner. So one of the key opportunities for this 2035 commitment is to create a decarbonisation, factory and get really slick and really good at it. So yeah, is it bold and ambitious and a challenge? Absolutely. But if I don't do it, they'll find someone who can. So that's the first thing. Your second point around climate change. So clearly the infrastructure is the responsibility of Network Rail. And we know that it was an extreme rainfall event which led to the washout, which led to the derailment, which led to the terrible, terrible loss of life. These events are becoming more frequent across the GB rail network, and therefore Andrew Haynes, who's my Network Rail boss, immediately commissioned 2 task forces, independent by 2 eminent worldwide specialists. One by Lord Robert Mayor on earthworks management, and one by Dame Julia Slingo on how the railway uses weather data and forecasting capability. And on the management of earthworks, actually Lord Robert Mayor said, well, what Network Rail does is really rather good, but you could potentially learn from some countries further away, Japan, Hong Kong, for example, and we're working through those recommendations as we speak. What Dame Julia Slingo said on the weather front was actually the railway had fallen behind some other sectors like highways and aviation on how to use weather data to manage the operation safely and reliably. And we've already taken steps to address that. But one of the things she has demonstrated is, we know Scotland's got interesting weather. We know that climate change is a global phenomenon. But what I saw for the first time was data which demonstrated that climate change is affecting Scotland more than the other 3 nations of the UK. That was genuinely new information for me. So Scotland has absolutely got to be at the forefront of implementing the recommendations from the Dame Julia Slingo and the Lord Robert Mayor reports, because we need to act fastest.
Thanks, Alex. I've now got Colin Allenach with a query.
Hi, Alex. No, interesting stuff. Thanks very much for that about the climate change stuff and everything. That's good. Question for me really is about the integration of the train systems. I live in Ellen, so I don't actually have a train line going past. So I don't use it that often, but I did ask some of my friends about the usage of the trains. And a lot of my friends are cyclists, and especially just now where they're not going abroad to Yorker to go cycling, there's been a lot of local cycling tourism, but they're having real problems. They don't use the trains because they can only get pre-booked 2 trains on, say, from Stonehaven, from Inverurie to Stonehaven, etc. And so they can't go out as a family group or as a club group or anything, or if 2. They can't just take they have to pre-book, so they just can't get on it to the bike, so onto the train with their bikes. Is there any plans for more integration, more spaces on trains for bikes and things? Because we have, in Aberdeenshire, we're talking about more tourism opportunities, local tourism opportunities like the NEAT, the Northeast Adventure Tourism things, which is cycle routes all over the area. And we want to encourage people to stay and use those areas, but it's difficult if they can't get from one place to another.
Yeah, I mean, Colin, it's a massive issue, if I'm honest. The £475 million investment which Abellio made in new and upgraded trains has helped the situation, because we've now got 25% more trains than we had back in 2015 at the start of the franchise. So there's now more space for everybody, which helps, and we're lengthening our high-speed trains as we speak. But it's a compromise between travellers with luggage, people with buggies, cyclists. It's a huge challenge, which I completely acknowledge, which is one reason why we're experimenting with dedicated cycle carriages. So next month we will be launching our active travel carriages, which we're calling them. We're launching them first on the West Highland line, but I personally think they're going to be a roaring success. And we've hired additional train carriages from other operators, and we've converted a whole coach for cycles, mountaineering equipment, etc. And we're going to try this concept on the West Highland line first. And if it's successful, which I think it will be, I think we'll see more of it. So I don't have any magic bullet here, I'm afraid, and nor do I want to give you false hope. But we do recognise it as an issue, and I think dedicated cycle carriages are the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor George Carr next.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Alex. I was just reading the ambitious proposals, obviously post-COVID, to reduce journey times between the cities. But I was just wanting your reassurance that that will not be at the expense of some of our rural dwellers, because we have had issues where we've opened some of our rural stations and they're being very well patronised, but subsequently went on to see changes in the timetable, and that meant that people were finding that the train was no longer convenient from a rural perspective. So there's obviously a balance to be struck here, but if we're keen to open rural stations, we really need to make sure that we're satisfying all rail users.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good point, and in fact your own strategy recognises this tension. It's a truism that if you want faster journey times, you can't stop everywhere, because that adds to journey time, and therefore our strategy to deal with this is to actually segment the service. So we have really high quality frequent local services, and similar for intercity. And inevitably sometimes that means someone might need to change. Ewan, who's joined me, is from our business development team, but is actually a train planner at heart. And Ewan, I don't know whether you want to comment on this with particular reference in the northeast and how we can try and square this circle.
Thanks, Alex. I think as Alex says, the challenge is always how do we provide fast intercity journey times between Aberdeen and the Central Belt versus a good service at local stations such as Portlethen and Lawrencekirk. I think the principles of the segregation of services, the intercity services which do run limited stop with a frequent local service, has proven to be quite successful. In the northeast, stations like Portlethen in 2019, just 1 year of having the frequent Montrose to Aberdeen and Inverurie service saw significant growth in just 12 months. And other stations such as Stonehaven and Lawrencekirk, where we'd seen decline over the last few years because of the changing economic situation in the oil and gas industry. We were starting to see year-on-year growth in the second half of 2019. So I think we actually, before this pandemic hit us, I think we were actually on the right track. Now, I'm not saying the timetable was perfect. We know we still needed to do a bit of work, and as we kind of work on the Aberdeen to Central Belt journey time improvements, I think we'll be working with Transport Scotland, Nestrans and Tactran on how we can find that compromise between journey times and accessibility, direct connectivity, and accepting that some passengers are going to have to change trains for some journeys.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Ewan. And I have no more hands up, so can I say a huge thank you to you and to you, Alex, for coming along and sharing your really quite searching questions coming from members, I think, and sharing your thoughts on a whole range of topics. So thank you very much. You are welcome to stay and listen and to the rest of the board meeting. But if you've got other places to be and things to do, thank you so much for coming along today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, members. So if we could move on to the agenda in front of us and first of all, look at budget matters, and we have an annual audit plan. If we've got Anne MacDonald to Mark.
Yeah, we've just skipped by the minute, the approval of the minute.
We did. We skipped by that. So let's go backwards and can we have a look at the minute of the board meeting of the 14th of April for approval? Is that agreed? I'm seeing nodding heads, so thank you for that. Thanks, Mark. And we'll move on to the annual audit plan and Anne MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know about you, but it certainly doesn't feel that long ago since I joined you to sign off last year's audit, but nonetheless, very pleased to be with you again today. So this is our annual plan for the 2021 audit, and the format will hopefully be familiar to you now. So this is year 5 of our audit appointment, and this would normally be the final year before there is a rotation of auditors. But you may recall that due to COVID, the procurement process was postponed last year, and all audit appointments were extended by 1 year. So this is year 5, and we'll have a further year 21-22. Relative to local authorities, we regard Nestrans as a small body, and as such, the bulk of our work relates to the audit of the annual accounts. I have therefore routinely brought the annual plan to you to consider alongside the unaudited annual accounts, as you have on your agenda today. So Exhibit 1 on page 16 of your papers, this sets out the key risks we have identified for the audit, and these are in line with the risks that we've identified for you in previous years. The first is a requirement of auditing standards and applies to all audits that we do, and it requires us to consider the potential for management override or controls. So this might be either for a fraudulent reason or to manipulate the results in the financial reports. The second risk relates to the completeness of Nestrans transactions within its accounts, and we identify this as a risk because Nestrans, as you know, uses the financial systems of Aberdeenshire Council, and therefore we draw on the assurances from that audit in giving our opinion on Nestrans. So just for information, my team are involved in the audits of Aberdeenshire Council and NHS Grampian and Aberdeenshire Integration Joint Board alongside the audit of Nestrans. Exhibit 2, turning to page 18 of your papers, sets out the timetable for reporting back to you with the audited accounts. I am aiming, as usual, to come back to you and conclude the audit in September, but we may this year need to delay until the following board meeting in November. Due to the impact of COVID, deadlines for audited accounts were extended last year, and although Nestrans was conducted to the normal timescales, audit work across all the local authority audits was not completed until February this year. So that was some 2 or 3 months later than normal, and that's impacted on the start of the 21-22 audits. Sorry, the 2021 audits. So because Nestrans is a small body, I am planning at the moment to report back to you in September as usual, but I would appreciate the board's flexibility if we do end up needing a bit more time and needing to come back to you in November. But either way, I will keep you informed. Paragraph 13 of your papers, paragraph 13 of the report sets out the audit fee, and I'm pleased to say that we're continuing to hold the fee at the same level as in previous years. Turning to Exhibit 3, which is on page 20 of your papers, this sets out our materiality level. So this is just a reminder of the identified error which we could permit in the accounts without it affecting our audit opinion. Turning to page 21 of your papers on Exhibit 5, this sets out for you a reminder of our wider scope responsibilities. So in addition to the audit of the accounts, we consider these wider areas. But for smaller bodies, our Code of Audit Practice allows us to focus on just a couple of these elements, so financial sustainability and governance and accountability. So at paragraphs 33 and 34, we list there a number of factors that we consider, and we'll report back to you on those when we provide the annual report alongside the audited accounts. And finally, at paragraph 36, I'm confirming that there's no conflicts of interest in my team regarding their involvement in this audit. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Anne. Any comments or questions from members? I don't see any hands. So if we could look at the recommendation on page 11, it does say to note the audit plan. I would be more inclined to agree the audit plan. If we could make a decision on that, bearing in mind that it would be good if we could if you were able to deliver in September, but bearing in mind that flexibility to deliver later in the year at our November meeting. Agreed, members? Thank you. If we could move on then to item 3.2, the unaudited annual accounts, and I think we've got Chris Smith with us. Hi, Chris, to take us through this.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon all. This report contains the Nestrans unaudited accounts for financial year 2021. The accounts themselves are detailed in covering Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 provides the standard budgeting monitoring format that gets reported to the board at every meeting. The covering report details the main sections within the statement within the accounts document themselves. Appendix 3 details the final drawdown to 21-22, and I was just going to note, and it's been covered by Anne, that I intend to take the final audited accounts back to the September board with a caveat potentially it could be November. Chair, there are two recommendations, so that's to consider the unaudited annual accounts for 2021 and approve the forwarding on to the external auditor, and to approve the final delay and drawdown for 2021. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Can I ask members if there are any questions for Chris on this paper? If not, can we agree the recommendations as laid out on page 26 of the report and outlined by Chris? Thank you very much, members. On then to 3.3, which is budget matters for the current year 21-22. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, as stated, this report provides an update on the partnership's 21-22 monitoring.
Chris, we've lost you. You are frozen, and I think we'll come back to 3.3 if we don't get Chris back.
Apologies, I think I lost you there.
Now, I was just about to. Yeah, here we go. Again,
apologies there. Yeah, I think I was just on to the report details and the recommendations for the board. So it's to note the final funding awards for 21-22 to Nestrans from Scottish Transport and also from the two constituent authorities. Note the monitoring position as at the end of April. That's detailed in Appendix 1. A couple of points to note: that there's additional grant funding awarded in 2021-22 through the RTP Active Travel Grant. Also under this procurement section within the covering report, looking for the board to approve extension to a contract for future travel behaviour and attitude surveys, and also to approve additional fee required for the Aberdeen sub-area model, and also to approve a list of requested environments in the final appendix. So six recommendations in total, Chair, for the board.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. Any questions, board members, on any of those matters, whether it's the extension to the funding requests or the environments that are contained on Appendix 3 or 4 or even, yeah, 4. I don't see any questions. Can we then approve the recommendations as outlined by Mr. Smith on page 81? Thank you very much. Right, if we could now go on to the strategy element of our agenda and bring in Rab Dixon on the Director's report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you very much, Chair. Item 4.1 is the regular Director's report, bringing members up to date on a series of meetings and connections we've had with other regional partnerships, with Transport Scotland and other partnership organisations. As members would probably anticipate, all meetings are currently continuing in a virtual manner. We have had regular meetings, as I say, with Transport Scotland, with the other partnerships and with ScotRail in the time period since the last board meeting. I'd like to draw members' attention, if I may, to Appendix 1, which is the steering group meeting of the Health and Transport Action Plan. And we have an item at 6.1 on today's agenda about the HTAP, so good progress on that. And also Appendix 2, which is the Bus Alliance Board meeting. And again, we have an item on today's agenda at item 5.3, giving an update on the Bus Partnership Fund bid. Finally, I'd like to draw your attention to the regional partnership chairs met on the 2nd of June and have agreed to send a letter to the incoming Minister for Transport, Graham Day. So the chairs agreed a letter which went off to Mr. Day, encouraging engagement going forward. So happy to take any questions on these matters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, members, any questions on any of the matters in front of us, bearing in mind we will be looking at HTAP in a little bit more detail. If not, if we could go to the recommendation, which is to note the progress on, Peter.
Yeah, sorry, I should have been a bit quicker at shoving the hand up. Forgive me. Rab, I was just thinking, if you've written to the Minister, it might be a thought. I mean, if you've written to him, then the letter's gone. But perhaps next time you write to him, ask him whether he'd like to come and visit us at some point. Easier for him to do these days because he doesn't need to travel all the way from Angus. But coming to a board meeting remotely would be very simple for him to do. We could maybe raise some issues directly with him.
I think that's a really good idea, and I think it was something that I was going to also bring up at the report as towards the end of the meeting on next business and so on. I think that would be a good idea. Rab, would you agree?
Yeah, thank you. Quite happy to draft a letter to Mr. Day inviting him. The letter I was referring to went from the chairs of the 7 regional partnerships.
Okay.
So inviting him to come and speak to us collectively as a group, but quite happy to send a separate letter inviting him to come and speak to the Nestrans Board in due course. Yeah.
Yeah, good idea. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Peter. If we've got no other queries or questions, note the progress on the liaison arrangements with other RTPs, the Scottish Government and others is what's in front of us. So if we could agree that. Splendid. And on to the RTS update, the Regional Transport Strategy update with Kirsty Chalmers.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this paper just provides a bit of an update on some 3 key strands of RTS work that we've been working on since we submitted the draft RTS in March. The first one of those, if you remember back in April, there was a request that we would look at how we could perhaps map some of the achievements that we've achieved, I guess, through the last strategies. So we had a bit of a think about that, about the best way to do it. It was quite tricky because a lot of them aren't very spatial or geographically based. So what we've produced is a timeline of really the last 20 years and the key achievements. So that's provided in Appendix A. Hopefully that fits the bill. I mean, it covers everything from the creation of Nestrans as a statutory partnership through the WPR and all the sort of infrastructure and policy milestones really for the last 20 years, finishing off with the submission of the new strategy. So that's there in Appendix A. We're also working on mapping of the new strategy, trying to map the geographic elements what we can. I mean, a lot of it's quite challenging to put on a map, but we've been working on a series of 6 maps to illustrate the geographic spread of actions contained within the strategy. These are going to be, rather than sort of just images inserted in the document itself, they're intended to go onto the website and to be more of a live document, a live way to link and provide updates perhaps on what's happening, progress. So I've got some examples of those that I can run through if you're happy and if there's time. I'll maybe just do that at the end of, or run through the report first and then do that at the end. The third strand of work is really relating to targets, monitoring and the delivery plan. So we're giving consideration to appropriate targets. There are indicators that are identified within the strategy, so it's thinking through the appropriate targets and data collection methods in order to monitor the strategy, and also the development of the delivery plan, which will set out those sort of short, medium, long-term actions and how they all sort of sequence and then the interdependencies between them. So what we're proposing for that is that we will we're proposing a workshop of the board in August time to discuss that, so then we can hopefully bring something back to the September board meeting. I'm currently looking for a date for that at the moment, so we will put that in diaries. But if the recommendations really in relation to the workshop would be to request a workshop for around mid-August, I think is probably what we're looking at. It's also to agree to publish the timeline and then a recommendation on the maps, subject to comments and discussion here, that we can then upload those onto the Nestrans 2040 website. One other final thing just to mention on the paper, and under the background, we have said that we're still awaiting comments on the draft strategy. Around about lunchtime today, we got feedback from Transport Scotland with some comments on the strategy, which I'm pleased to say are quite positive. It's very, the comments, I haven't had a chance to go through it all in detail, but they're very focused on just contextual issues, some issues that we might want to clarify. They've provided some information and clarification on some items relating to STPR2 and just additional references. So I'm fairly confident we can take them all on board relatively easily. There's no real substantial change to the actions or the policies or the overall direction, thankfully, of the strategy. So they seem to indicate in their letter that they want to see a further draft of that before it would be approved by the minister, but we'll clarify that with them. As I say, it just came through today, so but I think on the whole it looks quite positive. So
thanks very much, Kirsty. I think it would be useful if you could manage to share with us your maps. Yeah, just on that last point, whilst it is very encouraging, I suppose the sign off is what we need to actually have. So we will look forward to that sign off from the new minister. And I must say, I was really pleased with the timeline, and chopping it in 2, I think, has really worked as well, and would be something maybe to even share with Alex Hines. Because the train stuff does really shine through that as well as all the other achievements over the last 20 years. So all right, here's talk us through this.
Can you see that? Okay.
Yes, we can.
So we've got 5 maps relating to some of the key themes within the strategy. There's still a bit of a work in progress, so there's some formatting issues, the dots that keep moving and things like that. But the first one really is on active travel. We're trying to illustrate the key priority routes, and the function of the maps really is that you'll be able to sort of click on an action and it will tell you the wording that's in the strategy and relate to it, and there's an opportunity for us then to update that with links to relevant websites or the delivery plan or whatever. So active travel, really focusing on the priority corridors that we've identified. We've got the national cycle network, and then for instance in Aberdeen, you know, to be able to click on that and it will come up with the list of actions that are being taken forward in Aberdeen. So active travel is the first one. We have a map on city centre, focusing very much on the key corridors into the city centre and all of those citywide and city centre action plans. This column down the left, again, you know, you can click on that and it will take you to, for instance, Kingswells Park and Ride, and it will contain the relevant actions within that. We have citywide measures, which, you know, really tries to encompass a lot of them. It's very difficult to actually map, you know, things across the whole city. So we'll be linking in with the relevant actions within there. I should say as well that, for instance, we've marked on the proposed corridors for Aberdeen Rapid Transit. So there's an opportunity to add in a link to the vision document that where we'll talk about later on. So city centre reimagining. We also have a rail map. It's quite challenging to get all of this onto one map without it being just over the top. So we've split it down, showing the rail network, rail line and service enhancements, for example. So you'll have a box around about the Aberdeen to Inverness and a little bit about what that is. We have, for example, new stations or aspiration for new stations, a little bit on Aberdeen. And for instance, Inch comes under, you know, accessibility upgrade, improved interchange opportunities. So
lots of scope to improve, not the, you know, to augment, I think, rather than improve the information that is available, which looks really good. I think. I hope other members agree. Any questions to Kirsty around anything? Yes, Peter.
Not a question, but a couple of very quick and complimentary comments, actually. I like the maps. I think that's going to be really helpful. The timeline I found interesting because it made me realise that things I thought happened a couple of years ago were actually 15 years ago, which makes me wonder where the hell the time's gone. But then I look in the mirror and realise where the time's gone. So thank you for making me feel very ancient, Kirsty. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
And just on the news that you had today from civil servants about the RTS, I guess it's a positive. They've come back with nothing hugely radical, no huge red flags or anything like that. Chances are that it's not, hopefully, touching wood, nothing subsequently will come. So that's actually really quite a positive step, I think. Although clearly the decision will rest with the minister, but I suspect civil servants will have a bit of influence there. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Any other inputs from board members? No? Well, thank you very much, Kirsty, for all of that. And I would agree, a good piece of work. So on page 106, we've got the recommendations outlined by Kirsty to agree to publishing the timeline, to publishing the maps, and to organise a workshop in the middle of August. Hopefully, just what we can do. I recognise that some people will be on holiday and so on, but hopefully that will take us forward on that front. So if we could agree that, members? I'm seeing lots of nods. That's good. Thank you very much. So on to City Region Deal Update is our next paper, and we've got Paul Finch to take us through that. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much, Sandra. In May, the beginning of May, I took a report to the City Region Deal Joint Board on a variety of transport matters, and it would felt appropriate to also share that information with the Nestrans Board. Sometimes I live a double life, reporting both to the CRD Board and to Nestrans, and I think only Councillor Argyle is the common denominator on these occasions. But some of these aspects are relevant for wider consumption, so that is why we decided to bring this report to you. The first section, introduction, just provides background to the way that the City Region Deal is set up for those who are perhaps unfamiliar with it. It was signed off in 2016. The total value of it is 826 million, although the actual direct funding is around 270 million. Within the deal itself, there are two transport projects which we are concerned with. One is about improving access to the new Aberdeen South Harbour, and another is a strategic transport appraisal, which looks pretty much paralleling the regional transport strategy and some of the projects that spin off that. At the same time as the City Region Deal was announced, Transport Scotland announced two complementary projects, of which we've already heard something about today as well. £200 million to improve the rail journey times between Aberdeen and the Central Belt, and also £25 million to improve the long-standing problem at Lawrencekirk at the junction of the A90. Those two projects are wholly funded and project managed by Transport Scotland, although they are reported to the City Region Deal on a periodic basis. If I just quickly work through the report in terms of the external links to Aberdeen South Harbour, a report was taken in February to Aberdeen City's City Growth and Resources Committee. They approved a preferred alignment for that improvement, which was pretty much along the coastline, coast road, improving the rail bridge in that location, which is an oblique angle, and then providing the linkage up to Wellington Road along Hareness Road, although there is also a secondary link to Crawfield Road and Suter Head. We're doing the business case for that work now to ensure that we get the funding for the design work from the Scottish Government and the UK Government, who are jointly funding that particular project, although it clearly links in with the proposed energy transition zone in that area, and also some of the work undertaken in Wellington Road, which is ongoing at the moment. The strategic transport appraisal, as I've alluded to, the first half of that work has really mirrored the regional transport strategy and helped provide the evidence base for that. It's also linked into the strategic development plan and also the local development plan. We've now got to a sort of juncture at this point where we've got to think, well, what we're going to do the next 5 years of this project. And so we've identified that there are some strategic projects that we want to continue to progress, where the CRD funding would be very beneficial in that. That includes business case work on Aberdeen Rapid Transit, pending the approval of the fund bid, further work on the A90 North, building on work the Nestrans has already done in that area, and also the Wellington Road corridor, because again, that complements the Aberdeen South Harbour and the proposed energy transition zone proposals very nicely. There's more modelling work to be done. Earlier in the agenda, we heard about the extension to that piece of work, so we can ensure that we are able to model accurately some of the changes that have happened as a result of COVID, for example, in terms of working at home. Also of interest might be some ideas to implement small-scale projects as live labs, is what we've called it, reflecting some work that's been done in England, where you can put in small-scale projects and take a lot of learning from that and see if we can then implement that across the region in a wider scale. We've looked at we are looking at mobility hubs, which have come through very much in some of the national work. See if we can roll out further alternative fuelling hubs. Again, we had great success at that at Kintore Station. Looking again at rural mobility and linking in with some work that's been undertaken at Aberdeenshire with demand responsive transit, and some of the work that the city are progressing as mobility as a service work. We believe that there's opportunities to continue to improve innovation in the monitoring and dissemination of road and transport network data, and also always we're looking at haulage efficiency just to make sure we're tying in with that opportunity, and we're putting out some work to further scope up those ideas and see if we can actually get some small scale implementation projects in the next 5 years. We can take some learnings from that. So that covers off the work that's within the City Region deal. I just talked about the 2 projects that are associated with the City Region deal but being managed by Transport Scotland, and these updates have leaned heavily on the work of Transport Scotland and the updates that they have given me. Aberdeen to Central Belt improvements, and we talked on that earlier. Work continues on the project. A most recent update by Transport Scotland confirming option selections progressing well, and they're looking to get this delivered by the December 2026 timetable change, and also highlighting the relationship between the signalling work and some of the track work that they're proposing and the decarbonisation work. I suspect that this is being pushed along by the decarbonisation work as much as the City Region deal commitments. In terms of the Lawrencekirk Junction upgrade, a lot of design work has been done. Orders were published. There was an issue around the state of one of the bridges, the local authority bridges in that area at Oty Hill, and that has caused us to have continued work on how we can overcome that problem. We thought we were making quite good progress prior to the election, and again, that work is now with the consultants who are coming up with different options to overcome the weak bridge at Oty Hill, which is an issue for a number of residents in that area. When that is resolved, hopefully that will resolve all the outstanding objections to the scheme, and the Transport Scotland can move to procurement and construction. So that's a quick overview of the transport elements which I provided, or was provided, to the City Region Deal Board in May. And again, I'm happy to share that with you. I'm also happy to take any questions that you might have on that general progress update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I see, George, you've got your hand up for a question or comment.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Paul, for the update. It's just going back briefly to the Oty Hill Lawrencekirk Junction situation. Do we have any timescale when we're likely to be able to get this resolved? I know the discussion's been going quite a lot, and I know there's a lot of social media speculation locally about that, which we're trying to keep a lid on, but it's not easy because obviously hares go running. And you know, we really need to try and bottom some of this out as soon as possible.
Absolutely. We've been having monthly meetings with the Transport Scotland and the consultant team. Prior to the Holyrood election, we thought we were making good progress on that work insofar as how much they were willing to share with local authority and regional transport partnership options. And it has gone a little bit quiet, I have to say, Councillor Carr, at the moment. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It might just be that it's going through their internal processes. So I have nothing permanent or firm that I can update other than what's provided on that report, I'm afraid.
Thanks for that. I've got Colin next, please.
Thanks.
Hi, Paul. Sorry. I mean, I really think the idea of having small projects that we can test out and see how they work out is good, but sorry, I don't like doing this, but we had this opportunity for stuff, especially the path down at the beach, and we didn't learn anything from that. We just basically ripped it up, and I've got the problem that if you are having small projects like this, you're just going to get a wave of horror at the beginning about change, and not to actually be able to learn the lessons from these small projects.
Possibly. I think what we've tried to do is select the projects on the basis of where we have identified them in the regional transport strategy, where there is an overlap with what's coming out of the national transport strategy and the strategic transport projects review. The implementability, and if there is, do we anticipate a public kickback from any of the 5 that we've identified? I probably suspect these are less controversial in terms of the impact on the day-to-day lives of people going about what they might expect. So the change to the physical environment might actually be less. But I guess that's part of the learning experience, Colin, and indeed the experience that you talked about should surely be in the back of our minds about how some of the spaces for people have gone about, although some of the spaces for people have been successful, and again others have been changed around as it's gone through the process. But I note your comment, and I think that's something we need to bear in mind as we go through that process.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we all should listen to what Colin was saying. I think there is a real need to listen, to consult, and I think done in this way that that's much more likely to be a constructive conversations with stakeholders, whoever they might be, in those than did happen with Spaces for People, which was a bit of a different beast. So yeah, I think lessons could be learned from that, and as we've said before, communication is key. Sorry about that. We've got George next.
No, thanks, Sandra. No, I was just absolutely going to echo just what you've said. There are ways in which we go about, putting forward projects, and consultation, as you said, is key in all this. You just need to go down to the beach and have an ice cream and talk to the ladies that are running the ice cream shops, and you'll get your ear bent. So. I think it's quite clear there's a right way to do things, and we've got to follow those tried and tested ways and means of doing this, to make sure that we take the people with us. I think that's a key lesson that I think we've learned from all this. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. I did, when I was reflecting on what you were saying, Paul, and it's maybe something to come back to, I think there might be an opportunity, as well as having, or not maybe in the same meeting, but it depends how many meetings we've got left, of course, as well. But I think, getting somebody from Transport Scotland along to one of our board meetings would be helpful too. We have done that in the past, and I think, Alison or Irvin or whoever else, I think just, hearing directly from them, because we do have quite a few of our projects, and concerns and issues and positives in the Transport Scotland side of the net on a tennis court scenario. So yeah, I think that's something else to put on our list for further business. So with that, no other hands. Can we agree to note the progress made in the report in front of us, colleagues? Thank you. And then on to the Community Sustainable Travel Grant Scheme. And that is Kelly. Hi, Kelly.
Hi there. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report is basically introducing a Community Sustainable Travel Grant Scheme. Nestrans currently operates a sustainable travel grant scheme to support and encourage travel planning across the North East, and this has been quite successful in the past, but it has mainly been used by private or larger public or third sector organisations. And in the past year or so, we've actually had to say no to some applications that have been unsuccessful, primarily from smaller community groups, as they're unable to meet the match funding criteria. The current Sustainable Travel Grant has this 50% match funding, which for some community groups, they just don't have that kind of funding to be able to match fund. So we're proposing to introduce a new community grant scheme, which would allow community groups, registered charities, constituted groups to apply for funding to implement a sustainable travel scheme within their community, but wouldn't necessarily have that match funding in terms of cash element. There might be match funding in terms of, their volunteer time or so on. But we were just putting this forward as something particularly in the light, because of the pandemic, more people are walking and cycling, more communities are really keen to have some additional active travel within their communities. So we thought this might be an appropriate way for us to use our grant funding to help these smaller community groups to actually introduce some sustainable travel within their communities. In the Appendix 1, we've put a draft criteria and sort of guidance for applicants. Again, this can be changed, but it's just really, we're looking to seek support from the board to approve the establishment of a community travel grant scheme. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kelly. And I agree that it has been difficult for some community groups, and to recognise that in-kind contribution that community groups can do is very valuable. Peter, you've got a question or comment?
No question at all. I think this is a very good proposal for the reasons that you outlined. And yeah, I mean the in-kind contribution is important. Because that gets additional involvement, engagement from communities if they know that the voluntary effort they put in has got a cash value in a sense when it comes to applying for grants. And this just takes away one of the big barriers that that groups sometimes face when trying to get funding. So totally supportive of it. And I think the guidance in the appendix is very clear, absolutely perfect. No change required for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Colin, would you like to come in?
No, I support everything Peter says there. Absolutely fantastic. My only question was when do we think we would be implementing this?
As soon as we can, really. We'd obviously just need to get sign off from our legal and finance people. We have run past the criteria with them already. But yeah, I would suspect we'd be able to do this fairly quickly if the board was in agreement.
Excellent, that's good.
I'm seeing lots of nodding heads, and so I think that would be what the board would want to do. So if there's no other questions or comments, if we could approve the establishment of a community sustainable travel grant scheme. Thanks very much, members.
Thank you.
And then on to Bus Partnership Fund update. Back to you, Kirsty. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is just an update on the Bus Partnership Fund bid, and also the to present to the board the documents Aberdeen Rapid Transit Vision. So just to confirm that the bid was submitted by the deadline of the 16th of April. The board back in February approved or endorsed the high-level content of that bid, and the details of what we're bid for and the costs are included in the report. But in summary, it was focused very much on that visionary, ambitious proposals for significant change based around the ambition to deliver out an Aberdeen rapid transit system. The bid includes funding to develop the business case for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, as well as significant bus priority on the 4 main radial corridors into Aberdeen and in the city centre. It includes, because of Transport Scotland's gateway process, this first bid is very much centred around business case and stag option appraisal stages. So it's really to take through some of those, but as well as some quick win interventions that can unlock bus priority in the city centre. So we're expecting a decision on the bid. They said June. We have got a meeting with them next week, at which I'm hopeful will be a decision / feedback. So obviously we can communicate that as and when that comes through. The bid was supported by the Aberdeen Rapid Transit Vision document. We've had consultants Jacobs on board to help us with the bid, and they've developed this document for us. And the purpose of it really was to support the bid to really kind of get across that ambitious vision, and we will use that going forward to engage with partners and the public on the sort of desire for that step change. So it sets out the overarching vision and the drivers for change. It sets out our anticipated timeframes and the vision for the network as a whole. So the recommendations of the report really are just to note the submission, and we will update the board as soon as we can on the progress, and certainly the next meeting a bit more detail on probably the next steps where we go from here. Fingers crossed successful, and also to note the publication of the vision document. Thank you. Any questions? Happy to.
I'm so excited about the possibilities of all of this, and I'd like to just to say on behalf of the board to thank you very much, Kirsty. I know you've put a huge amount of work into this. It's been you know, a very quick but very, you know, difficult process in some ways, but you really have stepped up the plate, and yeah, we will all be keeping our fingers very much crossed over next week to see what comes back on our bid. I'm not seeing any questions, so if we could agree to, as Kirsty said, on page 122 to note the submission and to note publication of the vision document as well, or the Aberdeen Rapid Transit project. Thank you very much, and thank you for that update, Kirsty. And on to our next item, which is the Health and Transport Action Plan. And if we could welcome Andrew Stewart to take us through some of that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. The purpose of this report is to request that the Nestrans Board note the Health and Transport Action Plan annual report. It was approved on the 22nd of April by the HTAP steering group, and you're being asked to approve the recommendation that we present the report to the 3 community planning partnership boards within Grampian. Just to briefly summarise the annual report for you. It's a co-produced annual report involving all of the different partners and stakeholders locally and nationally that have played a part in the work around the Health and Transport Action Plan. Board members will remember that there's a commitment to 2 themes and visions, with a subgroup each looking at a theme. Theme 1 being transport and public health, and theme 2 being access to health and social care. During the past year on transport and public health, partners have worked together to promote and support each other with respect to changing guidance on physical distancing and how this impacted residents and their travel across the region. One example of this was the steering of NHS Grampian towards Spaces for People funding, and NHS Grampian was one of only 2 health boards in Scotland to receive funding from this source. £814,000 was awarded, and if there's time, I can share some images that show some of the work that's been done to take that forward. There's also been a lot of facilitating lessons between different organisations in Grampian around Spaces for People, and sharing that in the context of implementing physical distancing measures on the NHS estate. An NHS Grampian project managers working on delivering the projects associated with that, and you know, it has lasting benefits to sort of wider aims around active travel. And as I say, I can share some images around that if there's time permitting. There's also been an emphasis on safe travel awareness raising through the HTAP forums between commercial bus operators, Get About Partnership, third sector organisations, and also the participation of public health colleagues in the work around road safety, North East Scotland, and the low emission zone, as well as Spaces for People measures in the public realm. We've had a focus during the past year on highlighting awareness across both transport and health sectors of inclusion and equalities issues. So we've worked with Disability Equality Scotland and the Mobility and Access Committee for Scotland, Deaf Scotland, and others to share their insights and inform transport and health colleagues. The report also makes reference to the role of the HTAP public representative, Virginia, who sits on the steering group and does a very good job representing patient experience, rurality, and equality issues. On access to health and social care, the HTAP network has continued to facilitate the subgroup meetings and additional meetings with public, third sector, and commercial transport operators. Of particular note is the excellent work of the team delivering the Think project, which continues to be funded by NHS Grampian, Nestrans, Aberdeen City Council and Aberdeenshire Council, and it's shown its value during the pandemic in helping coordinate transport for multiple purposes, including helping staff get to work in the NHS, coordinating getting people to test centres and treatment during lockdown, and 1,100 trips assisting vulnerable people to vaccination centres. Think was also included in the vaccination appointment letters, and the project continues to be hosted by staff at Aberdeenshire Council's PTU, and there's been lots of positive feedback about the assistance that's provided to people and organisations. The recognition of that work has sort of been picked up by stakeholders in Disability Equality Scotland, Community Transport Association Scotland, and the Mobility and Access Committee for Scotland. And I'm pleased to say that colleagues from Transport Scotland and Scottish Government are attending the next HTAP steering group on the 25th of June. A lot of that work includes working closely with colleagues in the third sector. HTAP supported the role of the third sector in several ways, including their representation on the steering group and subgroups, but also through initiatives like the Grampian Volunteer Transport Awards, which were delivered online last October with around 60 attendees, and sponsorship from a freight firm, which was very much appreciated, and subsequent volunteer recruitment drives to try and boost volunteer numbers, which has helped boost volunteer drivers at RVS. The report also includes reference to work around supporting the Belinked project, which is a new community transport project in the Buchan area, which we're happy to support and get involved with the evaluation of it in terms of how effectively such a service helps plug gaps in the transport system and address transport poverty. Board members will probably be aware of the amount of online remote health appointments that's taken place, so we have an interest in HTAP in seeing what the long-term effects of this are on travel patterns are, and I'd be very happy to take any questions. If there's time, I can share some images of the Spaces for People measures.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And we're always privileged to have Jerry Donald on our board, so we do keep up with what's happening in HTAP. But I know, having been at the Grampian Volunteer Transport Awards and dialing in, there is a heck of a lot goes on in the background that, you know, there's not always a spotlight shone on some of that work that is, you know, things just wouldn't work without it, to be quite honest. And so thanks very much for sharing that with us today. Yeah, fire something up. Choose one or two to share with us. Your favorite slides from that. And in the meantime, if anybody else has got any questions on the action plan or the report, please chip in. So, Jerry.
Thanks, Chair. Perhaps just maybe to reinforce a couple of points that Andrew made there. This year has been exceptionally difficult. I know it's been difficult for everybody everywhere. The health service couldn't have gone past this past year without the support of the Health Transport Action Plan. That is undeniable. We've been very grateful for the third sector, the public sector across the board, in supporting us at a time indeed when the healthcare system was under immense pressure. We've had to employ private ambulances to support us in addition to the private sector, from the private sector and from the third sector. And yeah, it's been incredibly trying, but the Health Transport Action Plan steering group was the glue that permitted the health service in Grampian to work so smoothly during the worst, hopefully the worst of the pandemic. It's not past, there's more to come, but yeah, hopefully the worst of it is past. And grateful also for the funding support from Nestrans. I think that should be recorded. And just to re-emphasise the point about Transport Scotland, we are hoping that we've got Transport Scotland engaged at our next HTAC meeting, along with the Health and Social Care Directorate as well at the Scottish Government. So thank you very much.
Andrew?
Would you like me to say anything about the update report, or is that?
No, I thought you were maybe just going to share a couple of slides with it, just a couple of pictures.
I think I made my best attempt at doing that while Jerry was speaking, so if it failed, I apologise, but I can share the slides by email.
That would be great. If you fire them to Mark, he can share them with the board, and we'll have a look at that. Thank you very much, Andrew. Can we agree, members? Can't find the page now, but here we go. On page 129, to note the contents of the report, and also ask that the report go forward to each of the community planning partnerships. If that could be agreed, members. Thanks very much. Okay, on now to the next item on the agenda, which is the usual progress report. So if I could just get any hands up for anything on that. Peter.
Yeah, two questions. Firstly, if there's any update on the access work at Inch, just so we can keep a watch on that one, because it's an important one. And secondly, I'm conscious I haven't heard anything about the A96 dualling for some time. So if there's anything coming out of Edinburgh on that one, that'd be quite useful as well.
Thanks, Peter. Kelly, if you could take the first one.
Yes, I chased Transport Scotland to ask that question about Inch and when we would get any update on our report that we had submitted at the beginning of April. And they got back to me this morning saying that we shall have comments on the 16th of June, so a week today. So once we hear back from them, we'll obviously let you know.
Busy week next week. Good. And Paul, are you going to come in on the second point on the A96?
Yeah, the A96, we've had series of meetings with Transport Scotland over the last month or so, one of which was talking about that they're now moving on to what they call DMRB stage 3, which is actually a lot more about the detailed design. Now they've come up with a preferred alignment. They're now looking at the actual implications of the design of that one. We had a very interesting workshop on the walking, cycling and horse riding assessment that they're about to tap into. And actually it was a very productive workshop because we were able to share a lot of experience that we've had following the Aberdeen Western Peripheral Route work. However, we did have some very positive assurances of their commitment to active cycling, and they were pointing towards the parallel schemes that they have up in Nairn and Forres about the extent of active travel, segregated active travel that crosses both the trunk road but also goes into the villages up there as well. So that was a very positive. The other thing that's happened is we've now instituted quarterly meetings with the design team. That's Aberdeenshire, Aberdeen City and Nestrans, so we can keep that liaison going as they're now working through that DMRB stage 3. And just basically just to continue our point of, well, what's the important thing here, and making sure that they are consulting properly, keeping everybody in touch and informed, and also where appropriate. I know that my colleagues in Aberdeenshire Council have been taking things to area committees. I think there was a session with Geary Area Committee quite recently, possibly for Martin Area Committee, I can't quite recall. But again, I think across the board we were seeing a bit more of a ramping up now of that design activity.
If I can come back very quickly, Chair. Yes, the active side of it is one we need to keep a close watch on. I'm very conscious that the dualling of the A9, for example, it took quite a bit of pressure on Transport Scotland for them to accept that active travel alongside the route was an absolute prerequisite. I think they've grasped that now, but we will need to keep a watch when it comes to the A96, so that they keep that in mind. Thanks.
Colin, would you like to come in?
Yeah, it was just one of the projects, the e-bike project. I noticed there was some launching that in September, I think, on one of the notes. Just wondering what routes we were going to be using and where about these e-bikes were going to be, if there was any update on that.
Have we got John or Rab?
Yeah, I can come in initially, Colin. I don't have an awful lot of detail for you on that at the moment. I presume you're referring to the city bike hire scheme,
yeah,
which the intention is to use e-bikes for that. It won't be on specific corridors, but will be citywide, as I understand it. But I don't have any more detail. It's a project being led by Aberdeen City Council, unless John can add anything to that.
John, you're going to come in?
Yeah, just briefly. It will be a city centre focus initially. Part of the issue, Colin and Chair, will be the procurement of the bikes as an issue, because they can't get hold of the certainly the total amount. They'll struggle to get some initially. They were still working in August, the last meeting that Kelly and I were at, so with certainly at least a trickle feed initially of the bikes, but the city centre focus initially was the sites.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other questions? If not, we'll just move on to publications and consultations. I think that's you again, Paul.
Yeah, sorry, I hadn't turned my camera off. So, quick run through. There's a paper on Scotland's national population strategy, covers issues relating to the size of Scotland's population, the structure, the age structure of it, and also the balance of that growth across Scotland. That balance is quite important in terms of transport and how we see that coming. I think that the forecasts are that both Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire will both see growth going forward. Aberdeenshire perhaps seeing slightly more growth than Aberdeen City on the basis of the modelling that the Scottish Government have done. And they were referring to some of the transport investment as being important to smooth out some of the growth in opportunity of population. In Scotland at the moment. So that's not a consultation, but that's a factual report, and is actually quite interesting in terms of that particular demographic modelling piece that has been done. The next is just noting that SPT's Strathclyde Passenger Transport's Partnership for Transport have put a case for change out on their regional transport strategy, similar to some of the issues that we've picked up on there. We don't necessarily see an urgent requirement to comment on that, although there are some interesting discussion of poverty and income accessibility as well. CBI have done a useful report delivering on a net zero vision for commuting. Again, something that can be commended to businesses in the area, looking at how they can respond to things like public transport, electric vehicles, and also active and shared transit. And I think this is something that we can pick up on, or is currently being picked up on by the Get About partnership and some of the great work that Kelly and others are doing in this area. We note that there's consultations going on the 2022 rail timetables, this by both ScotRail, LNER and across country. And I think, again, we picked up on some of the pertinent issues of relevance when we had Alex talking to us earlier. Continuing on the rail theme as well, and something that actually that Alex didn't pick up on was the Williams-Shapps plan for rail, which is actually quite a significant document and something that the rail planners have been waiting for a long time on, about how the UK government intends to reform the rail network in the UK. However, I'd probably note that a lot of the rail responsibilities continue to be devolved to Transport Scotland. And I think there was a paragraph quite early on in that report that said they don't intend meddling with that side of things. I think the biggest change will be to how we interface with Network Rail, which will soon become Great British Rail or something along those lines. So again, something to watch, and we could be a world beating the Great British one, but that perhaps is a bit, I shouldn't have said that, but So there we go. So that's the rail side of things. So that's on there. A couple of consultations have come in since we wrote this paper. TACTRAN have got in on the act on the regional transport strategy, and they've also issued a main issues report, which we probably will respond to, being a neighbouring authority. And also the Ethical Standards Commissioner has written to Nestrans on a strategy for the next 4 years' work, again looking for comments on the 30th of July, and again we will have a brief look at that. On initial look from an officer basis, we don't see anything too alarming in it, but again we will develop responses from that, and as ever for those ones which we do respond to, we will circulate our draft response to the chairs for their approval prior to going there. Okay,
Thank you very much, Paul. If there are no questions, all we're being asked to do is really note that list of publications and consultations, what they contain, and the two that Paul mentioned as well that weren't actually in the report, if we could note those and move on to the information bulletin. Rab, is there anything you want to draw to our attention in that? Again, it's a noted report.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly to mention one or two things. Getabout is going to have a summer focus on road safety and particularly cycling. We know that cycling accidents, I suppose maybe unsurprisingly, are higher in the summer. And in collaboration with the Road Safety North East Scotland and with Police Scotland, we're going to do a campaign over the summer looking at road safety and cycling. There will be some synergy actually with national campaigns. I think Cycling Scotland themselves are doing an awareness on close pass. So how close drivers go to cyclists and how much room they give them. So there are some synergies with that. Also, I think it was mentioned at the last meeting that we had been applying for some funding for pedestrian and cycle counters. We're now able to reveal that we've got funding for 21 counters across both Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire, which will be fully funded by partners Cycling Scotland and Sustrans at no cost to either the councils or to Nestrans. And finally, there's an update on the media which has gone on since the last meeting, which again has been quite a number of items there for members' interest. The report's for noting, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions to Rab on that, members? If not, could we agree to note the contents of that report? Thank you. And move on to conferences and presentations for our noting as well. Not a huge amount on there, Rab.
Nothing very much to pick up on. There have been a couple of online conferences which staff have been attending, have actually been quite impressed by, and I think are realising that not having to travel to Edinburgh and Glasgow to go to conferences can be beneficial. So I think the number of conferences starting to be advertised is picking up again, but a lot of them are still online. I think we're moving into a phase whereby there are ways of doing conferences which don't require travel, but some of them now also include breakout groups and even networking opportunities, which I think is what we feel we miss from not attending conferences. But we seem to be moving towards a new style of conference.
Thanks, Rab, for that. Any questions on conferences and presentations? Nope. If we could go on to pending business and any future meetings.
Thanks, Chair. We've already mentioned that it might be worth inviting Mr. Day to see if he would come to a future meeting. We will bring back reports, obviously, on the regional transport strategy and on projects, particularly the Bus Partnership Fund, Inch Station, the study into the Lawrence Kirk to Aberdeen multimodal study, for example. So there are a number of reports which we will be bringing forward over the next couple of meetings. We weren't sure of the timing for any of these It may be that there are items that we feel the board need informed of before waiting till the next meeting. So it may be that we do that by email if necessary. So happy actually if members have anything they feel that they would like bringing to future meetings. But otherwise we will just continue with a programme, which I think I mentioned previously. We don't want the regional transport strategy or its approval to be the end of the process, but rather to be the start of the process where we actually go about delivering on the objectives and a better transport future for the North East that we talk about in that document. So we see it as a springboard to the projects that we hope to deliver over the period of that strategy. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Rab. I don't know if members have got any particular thoughts on any areas of work that you know they would like to see a little bit more meat on the bones of what we sometimes get. I suppose one that we might consider is the airport, and we know it's been a difficult time, and you know, again, that whole decarbonisation question is relevant there, because I did some carbon literacy training on Monday, and it was very interesting to see that, as we know, transport is one of the big blocks that needs to be tackled to help get to net zero, and just getting that balance right between air transport and all the other forms of transport. We're a long way yet from being able to use airplanes without carbon fuel, but I know there are a project going on in Orkney and for hydrogen and so on, but I think that'll be a little bit in the making. Peter, have you got something to add to that?
Yeah, just to add to your the decarbonisation piece, I think I was very struck listening to Mr. Hines earlier on. I hadn't quite appreciated, because I hadn't perhaps lifted my eyes up to that particular horizon, if I can use the expression, but decarbonising the rail network by 2035, which is 14 years, which will involve electrifying from the Central Belt to Aberdeen and on to Inverness, and not forgetting the far north of Scotland, and all that goes with that. The investment, if nothing else, is going to be massive. And I think it's something we need to keep a watch on, because just thinking of the £200 million that is in the side deal for the City Region deal for improving journey times to Edinburgh by 20 minutes, which may or may not happen. And that's, you know, doing some improvement work to signalling and bits and pieces of that kind. Not to belittle it, but I mean, that's £200 million. And that doesn't include electrification or anything like that. And when you think of the extent of the network across Scotland and the miles and distances and the complexities and the bridges and all of that, I think it's something we need to keep a close watch on. And it's maybe even something the Minister might like to talk to us about when and if he comes.
Thanks. Yep, good point. Paul, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair, just we've now actually started engagement with Network Rail on this decarbonisation project, and I've been facilitating meetings with Aberdeenshire Council and Aberdeen City Council and what the implications might be on that. So perhaps that's a hook in order to perhaps develop something that we can bring back to the board on. So yeah, the Network Rail have very recently started engaging us on that. We've taken the opportunity to get involved early so that we can understand what the impacts might be, but possibly what the opportunities might be. If Network Rail are doing all this work on these road over rail bridges, are there opportunities there, perhaps aligning with some of the plans that our structures colleagues might have to get some win-wins out of it, or at least see there. So yes, work is ongoing, and again, perhaps that's something we can consider.
Good idea. Anyone else want to chip in? If not, that's us at the end of the public section of this meeting. We do have another paper to take on staffing matters in confidence. So Mark, if you could finish the recording.
Yeah, just doing that just now.